Slamcast. 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 Welcome. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Slamcast. I'm your host, Greg. Let's get it started. How are you guys doing this week? I hope you're having a good week. Hope you're having a good day. Hope everything is good. Last week, I'm sure that was interesting for a lot of you, and also noticed that last week was a train wreck. That's why I named it so, but that's besides the point. I had a lot of fun with that. I want to thank my guests again, Robbie and Anthony, for joining me last week and discussing the things we discussed and having fun with all that. I'd love to have them on again, and I'm sure I'll have them on again eventually. My main issue is that I definitely learned from that experience, and I'll have some topics on hand. I figured if I had guests on, I wouldn't need to have topics like I do every normal week I record. But I feel like having a guest on, or not having a guest on, but if I have guests on, I should also have topics to discuss with them and not kind of expect them to have an idea as to what we're going to talk about or what they want to talk about kind of thing. I should prepared better for that, but live and learn from that experience. And I still had a good time making it. Even though it's titled Trainwreck and it was a bit of a train wreck, I still enjoyed it and thought it was a really good and really funny episode. So thanks again for listening to that, regardless of how brutal it was. I actually had a lot of listeners listen to that. Highest Spreaker viewers. Did that sentence even make sense? I always upload to an audio-based platform, which used to be SoundCloud, is now Spreaker, and then I always, later in the week, upload to YouTube, and I had, I think, 50 on the dot plays for my Spreaker upload, which is the most I've ever had, and I think that's the most total views I've ever had for a single episode. So I'm pretty proud of that. So I want to thank all of you who decided to listen to that. But yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I hope to have more varied guests on the show as well. But another thing that I also added last week, which I didn't get a chance to mention on last week's episode because I kind of added it in at the last minute, way before I was planning on recording that episode, or way after I'd recorded that episode, I guess I should say. I added it in. Was an intro and outro and an intermission, which honestly was never planning on adding to the show, but since we had a bit of an intermission with last week's recording, I figured I'd make one as well. So I hope you guys enjoy those. I'll probably still be tweaking with the audio as the weeks go on, but I just had an idea for those over the last week or so and decided to actually go through with it and add it to last week's recording and for future recordings as well. But but I think I might attempt having new intros and outros maybe once a month, depending on how often and how willing I am to record new intros and outros, and if I have the creative juices to kind of make new intros and outros. We'll see how that goes. But enough about talking about the show itself. Let's talk about some new stuff. I'm probably going to keep this week a little light. I don't know how long the discussions will go, but it's probably a good thing seeing as how last week was an hour-long episode, so I didn't really plan anything great, or not great, but deep in terms of discussion topics this week. I also had a bit of a setback this week, and I'll get into that in a second. Something I feel like talking about. First and foremost, though, just so I can brag about more purchases that I've made. I bought a new phone this week, and I'm very happy about that because, as some of you may know, I had an iPhone 4S for quite some time, and that was a hand-me-down of a phone. I didn't even own that outright. I kind of got that handed down to me. So I had that, and that was already kind of outdated when I got it, but I never had a data plan before that, and I kind of got upgraded to a data plan from there. So I was more than happy with that, and I thought that was pretty awesome. But yeah, now it's gotten to a point where I really had to update my phone because, as some of you may also know, my iPhone 4S required 2 elastic bands wrapped around it in order for me to charge the phone properly. And at the beginning of this week, on Monday, I woke up and my battery was only about halfway charged, which kind of freaked me the hell out because I thought the battery had died on me. It turns out it hadn't. It had just stopped charging sometime early that morning, or in the middle, I guess in the middle of the night, if it wasn't able to get a full charge. But still, that was enough to kind of freak me out and make me realize that I should get a phone sooner rather than later, so that I don't run into an issue where I don't have a phone. Even though the current lifestyle I have, not having a phone isn't too drastic, but it's still a nice thing to have on hand at all times. So yeah, I decided to make an upgrade, and I was still able to keep the current plan I have because, as some of you know, Canadian telecommunication companies have garbage plans, and the one I had was already fairly good, and the ones that they were offering were pretty garbage, the one I already had. So I decided to stick with that one, and I'm glad I could. But I'm sure some of you are wondering, what phone did you upgrade to? I upgraded to the Nexus 6P. And it's kind of funny because for the past few months, I've definitely been considering upgrading a phone, but I haven't really put a lot of thought or time into research as to what phone I would want. And there was always the two main questions on my mind was, do I stick with the current telecommunications company that I'm already with and either stick to my plan or upgrade to a different plan, or do I go to a different company and look for a better plan? As I'm sure most of you know, Canadian telecommunications companies all basically have the exact same plan, so that's no use. And like I just said, the plans themselves were pretty shit, so I just stuck with my old one. I was lucky enough that I was able to do that. But then the next question was, do I switch from iPhone, iOS, or do I switch to Android? And like I mentioned, I was planning on doing like a decent amount of research and just looking stuff up and spending a decent amount of time into this, but I ended up just kind of watching one review video on this phone, and it was a really well done review video, and I was kind of just sold on the product. I was like, this looks good enough, I'm just gonna get it. It's not outdated, so I'm not buying in upgrading to a phone that's already outdated, but I'm not getting the most high-end stuff, so I'm not shelling out a crap ton of money for this phone. But it seems to be doing the job right now. I'm very impressed with its performance so far. It is a massive phone as well. That was probably the one thing I didn't take into account when I decided to pick this phone as the phone to upgrade to. It is massive, and it's funny now because when I pick up my old phone, or when I pick up somebody else's phone that isn't of the same size as the Nexus 6P, it honestly feels like it kind of screws with my eyes. It feels like an optical illusion. Like the other phones are just so small in my hand now, and this one's so massive in my hand. I actually found it hard to type or function properly with just one hand on this phone sometimes, which is a bit of a downside right now, but I feel like I'll adapt to it as I go. But I also noticed that the Android OS, I'm on Marshmallow, for those of you who are curious. Marshmallow out of the get-go is pretty good right now. It's working pretty well. I should definitely get a case for this, though, because it's a nice, sleek phone. I don't want to get too thick of a case, but I already have one scratch at the side of it, luckily, not on the screen. It's pretty noticeable if you're looking in that general area of the phone. It's on the side, on the side rim, I guess, of the phone, you would say. But yeah, I've been liking it. All the features run smoothly. Everything runs smoothly. The battery doesn't die on me quickly at all compared to my old phone. The one thing that I do really like, I think the main thing that sold me on this whole phone is the finger scanning to unlock. And the thing about this is that the finger scan is actually on the back of the phone. There's a little circle. If you Google it, there's a little circle on the back of the phone, and that's where you put your finger. And comparing this to something like the newer iPhones that have the scanner where the home button is, I feel like actually having the finger scanner on the back of the phone is actually a genius design decision, because I can honestly scan it if it's face down on my desk and it'll unlock instantly, or if it's in my pocket, I just put one of my fingers over the scanner and it unlocks instantly. Or if I pick it up, like I don't really have to move my hand because it's already in a natural position where excuse me, how your hand would be holding the phone. It like your index finger, whether you're right or left-handed, 'cause it's directly in the center of the phone. Yeah, your index finger already rests very nicely on this finger scanning circle. So it's pretty awesome. That's like probably the best, not the best thing about this phone, but it's definitely the most new and most innovative and most helpful feature in terms of things that you wouldn't think you need. I know there's a term for this. I can't remember right now, but there's a term for something customers don't know that they need until you design a product with that in mind, and then customers or product users realize they need it. It's one of those kind of situations. And that's one of the things I like about upgrading, especially phones, because initially I started out with this smartphone. Well, in terms of phones, I started out with one of those basic flip phones where it was like you flip it long ways kind of thing, and then you could text that. And then I upgraded to a smartphone without a data plan, but I was still able to use apps. So that was kind of like new and innovative for me. And then I upgraded to iPhone 4S, which had data on it, which was like new and crazy for me. And now I have this whole finger scanning mechanism, and also Google Now, I believe it's called. That's pretty awesome. For those of you that don't know what that is, you essentially swipe left from your main screen and it shows you this weird sort of Google page, and it kind of gives you updates on general stuff, your general interests, and also your general location, such as weather. And I'm just flipping to it now, and it's telling me turn clock forwards 1 hour, Sunday, March 13th, 2 a.m. because of daylight savings garbage. But I remember I was looking at it and I flipped to it while I was at work, and it told me how long it would take me to get home. I've only had this phone for a few days and already has memorized generally where my work space is and where my home is. And it, even though it was early in the day, it already told me it was going to take me like 25 minutes to half an hour to get home if I left from work around that time, because it was close to quitting time, I guess you would say. And it also has this cool feature too where you can add a safe space or safe area. I can't remember the name for it, but it's essentially you set it for somewhere like your home. So because I always have it set to lock, so you have to use my fingerprint or my pattern or password to unlock my phone whenever I'm opening it. So it has this sort of safe area function where if I'm near my house, in the general area of my house, it guesses that I'm already home, and when you unlock it, you don't have to enter any sort of password or use my fingerprint to open it or anything. It just knows that I'm home and instantly unlocks for me, which I think is a pretty awesome feature as well. But enough about my garbage phone that you all probably don't even care about. Let me see what else. Yeah, so the reason I really don't have any topics this week is because according to the doctor that I talked to at the walk-in clinic I went to earlier this week as well, I was induced with I was diagnosed with, the term I'm using is viral induced vertigo. So for those of you who don't know, vertigo is a sort of, I don't want to call it disease, but it's some sort of illness or some sort of dysfunction with the body, mainly in the inner ear area, that kind of sets somebody always off balance and makes them feel dizzy and sometimes nauseous and gives them headaches and stuff like that. And right after my lunch Monday, I just got a really weird dizzy spell and felt extremely off balance for the next few days. And I'm actually feeling a lot better as of today and yesterday. I'm really not getting any of that, as I can tell. But yeah, I went into a walk-in clinic and gave the doc the symptoms that I've been feeling, and he basically said that it was some sort of vertigo brought on by some sort of virus, which honestly, vertigo sucks, and it's also like the weirdest thing that you could get, because it just sort of throws your whole brain off of whack, for the lack of a more dated term. Throws you out of whack. But like honestly, when I first got it, when I got that one dizzy spell, I was just sitting at my desk at work and I was getting dizzier and dizzier, and I was like, what is going on? I'm sitting at my desk staring at a laptop screen. Why am I getting dizzy? And then just for the next few days after that, just something as simple as walking down a hallway, if I stared directly at the end of the hallway, it would kind of just set it off, and it was like, ooh. Or just like sitting at my desk, it was just, I could always kind of feel that something was off. And it's like one of the weirdest, head colds and vertigo and that kind of stuff always kind of weirds me out, but also fascinates me in a weird way, because it's just sort of, you feel so off, but nobody else can tell, and there's no simple way to sort of cure it or get rid of it temporarily or anything. You kind of just have to endure this like sense of being off balance. It's not fun, but I also find it weirdly interesting how the human body can do something like that to you just because your inner ears got fucked up. You know what I mean? But yeah, he really didn't give me any sort of, I don't want to say relief, but any sort of cure. He said he could have given me some meds, but he said they would make me extremely drowsy. And I also kind of made it pretty clear to him that seemed like I was out of the worst part of this sickness, and he knew I had a day job to go back to, so it's probably a good thing he didn't prescribe that crap to me. He also gave me some sheets to set me up to get some blood work, so I got to get that done. He said there was no rush for that though, because he figured it was that. But it was weird because he kept hinting at the possibility of me having diabetes, and as far as I could tell, I think I'm very far away from that possibility. I'll still get the blood work done though. I'm sure everything will come up clean and smooth and clean like gasoline. But aside from that, I should be fine. I'm a healthy young baby boy. Yeah. Healthy young baby boy. But yeah, that also got me thinking of just modern medicine is a pretty fascinating thing to me. Mainly the whole idea of the fact that humans came to a point in our existence where we realized that you could cut somebody up or take something out of them. Talking about blood work here, because I know at some point earlier in modern medicine, we thought just emptying people of quote unquote bad blood would cure them. But, cutting somebody open in such a way that they don't like bleed out and die, and then like fixing some stuff up inside of them or whatever, and then sewing them back up would somehow fix us. Like, I find that whole realization pretty fascinating, and how it's like kind of common practice now. But just think of like the first time anybody ever came up with that idea and tried to like prove it or tried to convince people that that was the way to curing people of whatever illness they may have. It's a pretty fascinating thing to me. Sorry here, folks. I'm looking at my discussion points for this week, and I wrote results, and I have no idea what that's talking about. Not talking about the blood test results because I haven't even done them yet, and I don't know why I would go into deep discussion about my blood test results. So I'm trying to remember what I might have been talking about when I said that. It's funny because I think I remember writing that down and being like, maybe I should go into more detail about what I mean by results just for myself later. But I was like, nah, I'll figure it out. Turns out I couldn't figure it out. What the hell did I mean? Results. Whatever. That doesn't matter. So, yeah. I'm just going to skip that. Trump's big in the news again. Because, I'm just going to keep talking about that. Actually, before I talk about Trump, I'm going to talk about TV show. Well, I wouldn't say finished watching it, but House of Cards, season 4 on Netflix came out about a week ago. Almost exactly a week ago. I just finished watching it today. Great season. For those of you that were disappointed with season 3, because I feel like most people can agree that season 3 was definitely the weaker of the seasons. Not to say it was a bad season. I thought it was a fairly good season as a whole. Not the greatest, obviously. Definitely one of the weaker ones, but I still thought it was a good season in general. However, I feel like season 4 definitely makes up for that because I could already tell after watching the first episode of season 4, and I'm sorry to my viewers who don't give a shit about the show or tried watching it and just aren't into it, but I just want to get a few points out. And also to be clear, I'm not going to get into any sort of season 4 spoilers. Like I said, the 4th season's only been out for a week, so it'd be a pretty big ass of myself to get into the spoilers of that. But season 3, by the end of it, I definitely had a feeling that season 3 was meant to kind of set up some other things in the future for a season like season 4, basically for the next season. But yeah, after being one episode into season 4, I could already tell that the sort of weakness, and I say that in air quotes, of season 3 paid off greatly, because I could tell and I was hoping that season 3 would be building up to something bigger in season 4, and it definitely does. And honestly, in my general opinion, and I feel like most people have seen a majority of season 4 will know what I'm talking about, but I feel like season 3 almost sort of ends halfway through season 4, if that even makes any sense. There's definitely a point in season 4 where I was kind of like, this feels like this could have been the ending to season 3, but I'm kind of glad it's not, because then I feel like a lot of people would obviously been weirded out as to how long season 3 was, and then the way that season 4 ends as well. I could definitely understand it. It's definitely a whole writing thing, but I definitely feel like season 4 definitely builds off of season 3. So if you're disappointed with season 3 and you're feeling skeptical about season 4, fear not, fellow viewers. It's a good one. It's also very interesting and awesome to see House of Cards kind of play out around the same time as elections for the real presidential campaign play out, because you see all these real life and fake politics kind of bounce off each other, and it's like, oh, it hurts how close this satire is to real life in some degrees. But that's just how good their writing is on this show sometimes. It's pretty awesome. I would highly recommend it to anybody who's skeptical and hasn't started watching it at all yet. I'd definitely say check it out. Kevin Spaceman is the best spaceman. But yeah, so some crazy stuff happened with Trump over the last few days. I'm not going to get too heavy into it because I'm not a very political person myself. And I barely know anything about my own government's politics, let alone American politics. But man, I saw some crazy stuff. People are basically like saluting to Donald Trump, but it looks like they're all a bunch of Nazis. Like, that's not the best thing ever. And then I feel very terrible about that whole protest thing. That's just a whole shit show. That's pretty ridiculous. I feel like that benefited nobody except for maybe Trump and his supporters, if anything, seeing as how that turned violent. I'm not blaming anybody for any of this or on either side, but for all the protesters that essentially wanted to stop Trump's madness, unfortunately, I don't see how all that played out. Stopping Trump and his supporters at all, which is the shitty thing. Because it's kind of funny, because it's kind of gotten to a point where a lot of people are kind of like, all right, joke's over. We gotta actually try and stop this madman. He's a madman, a madman. But yeah, like I said, this week's just going to be a lot of light topics just thrown around back and forth, because that's all I really have this week, and I feel like I should just wrap it up now before I start scrambling for other topics to talk about. I want to thank you all for tuning in and listening. Hope you have a great day or night. I hope you have a great week, and thank you. And now let the intro take you out. I don't even have to say, that's the greatest part about having intros and outros now. Half the time, I don't even have to say welcome or goodbye. I can just have my pre-recorded voice do it for me. So pre-recorded voice, take it away. Well, folks, that's all we have for this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for whatever crazy shit we talk about. Until next time, have a good one, and